Yeah.
Well, the facts about vaccines are very clear and very strong, which is both that they're safe and that the vaccine schedule has been designed to reduce disease. And the more parents that adhere to it, the more not only their children will be protected, but you have some kids who are immune deficient. And so unless the kids around them are protected, then it puts those kids at risk. And there are diseases like measles or pertussis that all it takes is a small cluster, and then mostly those diseases would be coming in from overseas, but you can get infection, and in some European countries you've had deaths because the kids weren't vaccinated. I don't think the U.S. government is going to come out with any negative statements. There may be a commission, and fortunately, if you look at the facts are quite unequivocal. We certainly are speaking out in favor of vaccines. So I'm a little surprised that we have to stick up for them, but it's true in every country that you get these rumors, and particularly in today's media, those rumors can get out and ahead of the facts because the rumors are sort of more salacious or, contrary to what you've been told type things. Here, I'm sure we'll have a chance, if necessary, to go through the facts again and get a clear positive message from the government.
And the risk is, if vaccines somehow, people are scared of having vaccines, the risk is?
Well, we're engaged right now in polio eradication. And the only way that succeeds is to get 95% of the kids to have these vaccines. And there we ran into a form of anti-vaccine sentiment that's even worse than U.S. rumors, and that is that two terrorist groups, one in Nigeria, Boko Haram, and another one in Pakistan, Afghanistan, the Taliban, said that vaccination was a U.S. plot and would sterilize women, and it was a very bad thing. And they took the women who were going out to the children's houses and giving these oral drops, oral polio vaccine, and actually killed a number of them. And so those negative rumors, the only reason we still have polio today, that we're not done, is because of that part of Nigeria that Boko Haram has caused unrest, and the border areas, including Baluchistan in Pakistan, where there have been these anti-vaccine sentiments. So, our risk is simply those negative things. So it's not just in rich countries that we run into this. It absolutely causes deaths if parents don't know. Bring your kids in and get them fully vaccinated.
And your drive to eradicate polio is to show that you can do it.
Well, it started in 1988 when it already had been eradicated in the Americas. So these were the U.S. in the 60s, the rest of the Americas in the 70s, showed that it could be done. And so in 1988, well before our foundation was involved, Rotary and a number of other organizations said, let's get rid of this. And it's been harder than was expected just because of these sentiments. Here we are in 2017, last year, less than 50 cases. So we are very, very close. In fact, there's so few cases now, the way that we track where the virus is we go and look at sewage samples, and we see, because a lot of kids get infected and pass it along without getting paralyzed. And so it's only through these sewage samples we know that there's still about 4 places in Pakistan and Afghanistan and 1 place in Nigeria that we haven't gotten there yet.
All right, let's see the next question. I got to see a card. Number 1.
Thank you both so much for being here. My question, again, is a little bit on the political spectrum. I was wondering what you're both most hopeful about in this new political environment we have, and also what you're both most worried about.
You want to take hope or worried, Martin?
Well, I'm confident that America will move ahead. It's been, from the time I was born until now, the real GDP per capita of this country has gone up 6 for 1. I mean, nobody ever dreamt that would be possible. And when you look at what's happened in this country over 240 years, it's an absolute miracle. When I went to Columbia Business School in September 1950, 1 woman in the class. I mean, this country moves forward, and you can't stop it. So I'm enormously optimistic. I say the luckiest person born in the history of the world is the baby being born today in this country. And we will go and, everybody half the country always is going to be somewhat unhappy, or close to half, about the last election. But I grew up in a household in the late 1930s. My dad was very Republican. My sisters and I didn't get dessert unless we said something bad about Roosevelt. I mean, it was it was required. And I heard all these apocalyptic views about after his third term there'll be no more elections. I've been hearing that all my life, and year after year after year, with occasional hiccups and an occasional seizure like we had in 2008 and 2009. But this country, it's all profit, folks. I mean, when I came in, just think of what it would have been like in 76, nothing here.
Yeah.
And now we've got...
And the velocity of change
Oh, it just keeps
every
moving.
day.
I mean, guys like Bill, they don't quit. I mean, he moves on to something like polio. He mentions 50 cases in the world. There were more than 50 in the ward where I went when I was a teenager to see a friend of my sister's. And they were all in these rocking machines and everything. They were destined to a terrible, terrible life. And it was just one ward in Omaha. And now that's the yearly total, thanks initially to, as well as currently, to Rotary and some. But people kept working on it. This world moves forward. And it's been doing... I bought my first stock when I was 11 in April of 1942. The Dow was 100. If you haven't looked, it's 20,000. Something good must have happened in between. And it's going to keep happening, folks.
Bill, I know you share the optimism. What about concerns?
Well, the optimism is partly that I think American innovation is strong. Support for research is by and large bipartisan. And so whether it's health breakthroughs or even energy breakthroughs, I think, every year that goes by, we're going to have more of those things. Now, this administration is new enough. We don't know how their budget priorities will come out. There are things like foreign aid, which is a small part of the budget, about $30 billion a year, but that means the U.S. is the biggest, that every time there's new leadership, we have to go in and articulate the benefits. It's well spent. It's not the image that people have in the past. And so right now, I think there's a lot of intensity to make sure we get that message out and get, both in terms of the executive branch and the Congress, to maintain amazing things like the President's Malaria Initiative or PEPFAR, which is an HIV thing. These things started under President Bush. And so our foundation's had a great working relationship with Democratic and Republican administrations. Most people wouldn't realize that U.S. foreign aid as a percentage of the economy, which is generally how it's measured, reached its low point in 1999 under the Clinton administration. Now, I'm not saying it was the administration. It was a mix of the administration and the Congress. Then, during those Bush years, it went up fairly substantially. Now, the economy helped with that, but these initiatives were really amazing. And, I'm hopeful that maintaining or even growing these initiatives will be a priority when there's a lot of talk about tax cuts and different spending activities. And so it is a bit up in the air during these months ahead.
And you've often made the point that no matter how big the private contributions are, sometimes in terms of sheer scale, you need a government.
Yeah, somebody asked me today, if PEPFAR, which is this AIDS program, was canceled, wouldn't private philanthropy make up for it? Well, PEPFAR is over $5 billion a year. That is this one aid program, which is a phenomenal thing that's saved over 10 million lives. That's larger than our foundation, which is the largest in the world. So there's no possibility the government sector, U.S., U.K., other European donors, that's $130 billion a year in total that's uplifting these poor countries in health and education. And if we lose the consensus around that, if people draw inward too much, we will hurt progress and there will be millions of lives lost because of it.
All right. And one thing that might be mentioned, Charlie, is that the difference between now and 60 or 70 years ago in the ability of really bright people, really innovative, really energetic people to get financed to do things is just dramatically better than it was at that time. So now, if you've got good ideas, and there's good ideas right in this crowd, and you've got energy, it's far easier to get financed to move forward those ideas than you could 50 or 60 years ago.
Is that because of the internet or crowdsourcing? Or what is it?
It's just lots more capital
Lots more
around
capital.
and people more optimistic about. People are very optimistic about business.
But better ways to connect the two,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
capital and those
Absolutely,
and the ideas.
It's dramatic. It's dramatic.
And the willingness to take risk. The first venture capital stuff is in the 1960s, and it's tiny. Microsoft, when we were taking outside investment, we took at a valuation of $20 million, we took $1 million for 5% of the company.
I'll do it retroactively, folks.
You had your chance. You had your chance.
We never spent the money. That is, our business was profitable enough. We really didn't need to do that, but we wanted people on our board to give us advice. And there's an episode of Silicon Valley where all these venture capitalists are courting this guy. And that really reminded me of what it was like. By that time, which was 1984, there were dozens of venture capitalists. And that's something that other countries have tried to duplicate. They have in small part, but not nearly as well. This willingness to take risks, the idea that if you have a failure, it's not a mark of shame, that, hey, what's your next startup going to be?
You heard his secret, folks. He gets his ideas from Silicon Valley. Be sure.
All right, cards. Let's see where the cards are, folks. Okay, number 3, take the card right there.
So you started this talk about how you'd able to make a model and it won't accurately predict what happens. And on the other side of the coin, I was wondering what happens when you create such well-developed predictive technology, and what are the ramifications and implications of that outcome?
Well, I don't think our predictive technology is going to be like an oracle. Warren's nickname is the Oracle of Omaha. But the percentage of times you can predict things like macroeconomics, because they involve emotional sentiment. We're a long ways away from that. The biggest modeling thing I'm involved in is a group that models diseases. So we look at HIV or tuberculosis and understand, okay, what do we have to do in terms of diagnosis and drugs to get these things down? Once we finish polio, we'll go on, and our next big challenge, which will take decades, but I expect will be done in my lifetime, is malaria eradication. So these models aren't nearly at the point where they can take human sentiment into consideration. The field of economics, a very basic question about what we should have done differently before the financial crisis, there really is no consensus, whether it's with the public or inside the profession of economists. They agree that some of the emergency treatment we did was necessary and important, and I wish that was better understood. But in terms of the root causes, it's actually a little disconcerting how little our models, our understanding, explain how that imbalance got so extreme.
All right, well, number 2.
Hi, my name is Eugenia. I'm in the engineering school here at Columbia. And I wanted to ask, you were talking about that you love reading. I wanted to ask if you have a particular book that it changed your life, like the way you think about things. And I also wanted to ask, what is the thing that you admire the most about each other? Like you, Bill, about Warren, and the other way around. Thank you.
They sort of touched on the second question, but go ahead. They may want to add to it. Books, though, first. Changed your life.
Well, a book did change my life, and it was by a fellow who taught here at Columbia, Benjamin Graham, and I read the book when I was 19, called The Intelligent Investor. And I'd been interested in investments since I was maybe 7 or 8, but I'd read every book in the Omaha Public Library by the time I was 11.
So why do you think you were interested in investing when you were 7 or 8?
Because I was too dumb to get interested at 4. My dad had a very small investment firm, and I would just go down and I read all the books that he had there, waiting to go to lunch or whatever it might be, and then I went over to the public library and read them all, and it just was a fascinating subject to me. But I didn't have any. I knew what everybody thought and all of that at an early age, but what Graham wrote made sense. I just happened to pick that book up at a bookstore in Lincoln, Nebraska.
But to investing per se, is there something about your core competence that made investing the perfect place for you to be?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't to be a pro football player. I looked. It was a question of zeroing out all the other incompetencies, and I was left with one thing.
Just the allocation of capital.
I was actually wired in a way that was. This would be something I would be good at.
So what wired in what way?
I can't tell you precisely, but I've got the right temperament for it, which is much more important than IQ. If you've got more than 120 points of IQ, sell the rest to somebody else. You don't need it in investments, but you do need the right temperament. You do it. You do have to be able to think for yourself. And getting back to, the earlier question, the first question I ask myself when I look at a business is, is it important and easy what I can determine about this business? Yeah. And a lot of them don't make it. Now, Bill is looking for hard questions that plague society and where intellect